Hi, I'm Jake Ray, and today on the Student Slant, Zach and I discuss his article on the Committee of Academic Misconduct and the rise in cheating across Ohio State's campus.
When you go into Board of Trustees meetings, when you're preparing for them the week before, I think it's the same with city council meetings, anything like that. There are a lot of documents to comb through in preparation, and you're playing a guessing game a lot of times. You get the documents on Monday. The meetings, for the most part, happen on Thursdays and Fridays here at Ohio State, the committee meetings. Wexner's is on Tuesday, but they're kind of their own thing, the Wexner Medical Center Board. So you get these documents on Monday. It's when they release them, and you go through them preparing for Thursday and Friday, and you're never quite sure what is going to be newsworthy. Even things that you look at in the documents that you're like, oh, that's newsworthy, sometimes by the time you get to the meeting, they talk about it for like 5 seconds, and there's no story there. So with these misconduct cases, there was a little brief in the compliance committee meeting about how COAM, the Committee on Academic Misconduct, was going to come and talk about trends they had seen involving academic misconduct cases. But it was in the same meeting that was receiving a brief on the Dr. Richard Strauss update. So obviously, you know, that those are sexual abuse allegations against a former Ohio State doctor. That's what we were focused on for that meeting. So these numbers actually kind of not slipped by us. We knew they were there, but they didn't get covered right away. And then, you know, they talk about them a little bit at the meeting, not much, but the documents are there. They get covered a little bit. But then you finally get the chance, like a week later, a week and a half later, where I can start digging into those numbers. And then it's really cool because, you know, those numbers aren't in the board materials, just talking about trends that are in the board materials, but you can go and get the yearly reports from COAM and really start digging into some database reporting. And it's tedious, but it turned out for me to be really rewarding, and I might even go as far as to say a little bit fun. I'm Zach Varda. I am the campus editor at The Lantern.
And I'm Jake Ray, and this is the Student Slant. You mentioned a bit about how data journalism, it was a little bit fun for you, even to like kind of surf through those numbers. How do you feel like searching through that and like really figuring out what the story was about through data and like what they were reporting helped you craft something that was a good article and something that you found could be worthy of going into an article?
So I will say to start, we have projects reporters here who do like, you know, months-long data reporting. It wasn't that kind of data. There's a lot of numbers there, but the whole report's like, I want to say like 7 pages, maybe 4 or 5 tables worth of numbers. So it was almost like the perfect like beginner data story for me. Like, all right, here's the idiot's guide to data, and not to downplay, you know, the work I did, but it was comparing one year to another year to see percentage increases and stuff like that. Super easy. You're working with 2 sets of data. That's it. And, you know, our projects reporters do just some of the most amazing work with, you know, thousands of data, you know, data sets that are thousands of entries long. So this was a little bit easier. And I think maybe that's why I can come out of it saying working with the data was fun because I didn't have, you know, a mountain of data. But as you start going through it, you know, COAM's not trying to hide anything from you. You know, it's not like it reflects bad on Ohio State to have high misconduct cases. I think it's kind of expected with the expansion of technology. It matches nationwide trends. So it's all right there for you. Even in the Board of Trustees materials, they said, look, we've seen since 2014-15 a 57% increase in misconduct cases. So some of it was pretty obvious, but then you get into it to see the trends and how punitive they are, and they've been getting more punitive. They've been university commented and said that's not like an effort. That just happens to be how it is, but that's what the numbers say. They've been getting more punitive. There's been harsher penalties handled down. And, you know, they just, in their public like statements, just talked about the overall cases or the overall numbers. But when I get into the data, I can see that, wow, chemistry had this huge jump. They're always at the top, but not like they're really at the top. They went from roughly, I can't remember off the top of my head, it was like 145 cases of misconduct, and then the next year was 272. Business, marketing, and logistics goes from 0 to 85. CSE goes up by like 100. And so you see this and you go, wow, there's something happening there because, there's fluctuations in other departments by 5 to 10 cases or whatever. They go from 1 to 3 or 7 to 5, whatever. These are major jumps. You got to go see what's happening. The business one happened to be that we kind of already knew. We reported on a case last year where a bunch of business students were in a group chat. And so we knew, okay, that's where this comes from. CSE, I don't know where that jump came from. Reached out to them to try to talk to them about it. Never heard back. Department of Chemistry, I see their big jump. I reach out to them. That data leads me to that request, leads me to one of the better interviews I've done this year where I get to sit down with the chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry and the vice chair for undergraduate studies in that department. And I get to have this very candid, on the record, conversation about they instituted Turnitin last year, saw a big spike in their cases. Similar thing happened with organic chemistry a couple years back. I get to talk to them about what they're doing to combat technology and rising academic misconduct. So it's just one of those cases where, we have a data class. Spencer Hunt, our advisor, teaches it, and he talks about how data leads you to the story. And, people like to harangue him for it because he loves his data. Mm-hmm. But classic example, I just kept going to the data, led me to the interview request, led me to this amazing story and this really interesting dive into academic misconduct cases and how one department that sees the most of them is combating them.
You mentioned how you have to kind of, it draws you to the story. You look through that data. Kind of what did they say when you kind of went into them when you were just like, hey, like I went through the data of the COAM reports, noticed that you guys had a huge spike. Were they expecting kind of you to reach out to them or?
I don't know if they're expecting it because I don't know if anybody ever expects that I don't know if anybody that's not in journalism expects like, oh, they're going to go get the yearly reports from COAM and look through the data of department by department, how many cases. Like, I think outside of journalism, some people look at journalists and goes, really? You want to spend your time looking through that? Like, really? And for us, we're like, oh my God, yeah. Like, anybody who's a journalism major got drawn to this, like, yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I think people outside it don't. So I don't know if they were expecting it, but they were very upfront. Like, when I reached out to them, I think I got an email back from the chair who was traveling out of the state within like a couple hours that connected me with her secretary, set up a time to meet, and then she made sure the vice chair was there because he, that's more in his, his field, his responsibilities, and he was very upfront. It's one of those interviews where you don't go in and we talk about the bell curve interview, start with an easy question, build up to the hard ones. Mm-hmm. It's one of those interviews where we all knew we were there to talk about. So I said, look, there's this big rise. Do you guys track it? What do you think when you see it? And he goes, he goes, oh, yeah, we can explain that. It's for one reason. We use Turnitin now. Mm-hmm. For people who don't know, Turnitin is a website where students submit their assignments and it goes through Turnitin's database to check for originality. So it will tell the professor, instructor, whoever, that, oh, yeah, this is copied from some other source, and will show you where it's copied from exactly. Even if it's two people in the same class turn the same thing into Turnitin, it'll flag that and say, these people have turned the same thing. So it was actually more straightforward than I expected because I wasn't sure if it was going to be like we're business where there was a huge spike and it was all because of one centralized incident, which because of FERPA, like when we reported on the business thing, the GroupMe thing, we just got to enough students that we could report it, but no one could ever confirm any of the details because, legally they couldn't do it. And I thought we might run into the same thing with chemistry where, oh yeah, we saw 130 person increase because there was one big example where a bunch of people collaborated. It was much more straightforward than that. They had just, they had basically taken actions where they knew they were going to see an increase. They instituted a new method to catch cheating that hadn't been there before. So of course they're going to catch more people. But it was, once you got past that initial why'd this happen and we got into the discussion of what they're doing about it, and we talked about teaching metacognition, which is thinking about your own thinking, talked about studying habits and stuff. It was just a really insightful conversation, and especially, I'm still a student, so it's always interesting to get the perspective of professors, because then I'm still going to go to a class later that day, and to kind of see how my professors are thinking about what's going on is definitely pretty cool.
Looking at your article, you had some small pieces about how they're now using technology to basically fight technology, with examples like Turnitin. How do you think that's going to change cheating and turning in assignments? Like, how did the chairs and vice chairs talk about that, mentioning how they're now going to be using technology basically to fight the rise of technology and uses of cheating and websites like that?
They're very candid that they know it's not going away, and I think everybody knows. COAM knows it's not going away. And when I talked to the vice chair, they stress that COAM's not there to be punitive. They're there to put you back on the right track. Because a lot of the cases, it's nearly half of all cases happen in 1,000 level courses. People in their first semester of college get caught behind, and they just want to catch up. And it doesn't mean it's excusable, but they just hit you with a 0 for just that assignment, get you back on the right track, move on. If it happens, they actually talked about this, if it happens in a 4,000 level class, you're probably getting hit with some pretty strong sanctions, because you're in a 4,000 level class. More is expected of you. You're now endangering your graduation. Only 5% of all cases happen in 4,000 level classes. It's very rare. I think it's just using technology to combat more technology. They know that it's never going to eliminate it, but they know that it will help them get people in the right habits, because more than anything, if they catch it, they can get people weaning off their bad habits of using sites like Course Hero, Quizlet, what have you. I think I use the term the proverbial double-edged sword, because, fancy words, in my story. But it's technology, here maybe more than any other campus in the country is booming and really enhancing our learning opportunities with the iPads that are given to all freshmen now. But you see the same thing, and I'm getting a little off topic here, in cybersecurity. For every new, anti-hacking method,
they come up with something.
They're months ahead. They've already figured out new ways.
They're ready for.
And it's going to be the same thing. They can stop for Course Hero and Quizlet. They're going to find new ways. People are going to keep using GroupMe to share answers, but it's just going to be do they keep exploding? Do they keep going up every 4 years? We see a 57% increase. Probably not. I can't say. Probably not. It's probably just them getting these new technologies, getting used to them, seeing the numbers go back down. Maybe in a couple of years, some new fad hits and they go back up. But I don't think, from everybody I talked to, from my review of numbers, that we're not entering a crisis where, because you have to think, so there's this big rise. There's still only 907 cases out of 60,000 students. So it's not like, oh my gosh, OSU's burning to the ground.
Yeah.
But it's still a very large increase, and it's a cool story that is data, technology on campus, and as the vice chair, Professor Gustafson, said to me, maybe a cultural question. Is this just part of wanting everything free on the internet? We also want our education free on the internet.
With that, you talked to people at COAM, correct?
No.
No?
I reached out for those interviews. I was kind of directed to their reports and to what they presented to the board. I was given a statement by a spokesperson. Never really got an interview with. I shouldn't say never really. I didn't get an interview with someone from COAM. I don't think it was that they were avoiding it.
Yeah.
They just felt like that the answers to my questions were in board documents. Obviously, I would have much preferred the in-person interview.
Of course, yeah.
Everybody does, but I wasn't going to get it, and the data was speaking for itself, so I didn't feel like it was a situation where I needed to push back the article to wait for that interview.
Yeah, I was mostly curious, just wondering how they allow, I guess, these sites to be up there still, putting out this material that obviously is helping students cheat, how COAM's not.
Yeah, I think that's just beyond Ohio State.
Yeah.
How is a site like Course Hero allowed to legally exist?
Posting plagiarized content, pretty much.
that is a little probably, that's a whole nother story that I wasn't ready to get into here.
Yeah.
This story already came in at like 1,700 words. And I think that's interesting down the line. How do these sites continue to exist? But the thing is, like, let's say the Department of Education goes out tomorrow and takes down Quizlet and Course Hero. We're going to see Quizlet 2.0 like in a month.
Yeah.
It's not going to matter. I mean, I remember in middle school, which for me was a while ago because I'm a little old to be at the paper. There wasn't Quizlet and Course Hero. There was Yahoo Answers.
Yeah.
And you posted your questions in the homework section of Yahoo Answers or Ask Jeeves. Or you could text, what was it? Was it KBG? Mm-hmm. And they would send you back answers. And so there's always going to be something. So I think for them it's about, and the vice chair, Gustafson, stresses to me, like, it's not even about, like, catching all the cheating. It's about, like, showing students, like, so if you use Course Hero and Quizlet to get all of your assignments, what are you learning? Mm-hmm. Why are you paying the ridiculous amount of money you pay for an education in this country if you're not actually going to learn anything but just pull your answers off of Google?
Yeah.
So they just really want to, I think his quote was, the punishments are just enough pain to get their attention. That's a little paraphrasing there, but it's just, the punishments are just enough to say, like, hey, don't do it again. So they have their attention, so they can say, like, hey, look, like, you're here to learn, and we get you fall behind, but, like, there's other paths, and if you're just going to get into this habit of pulling things off the internet, like, you're not actually being educated.
With this being a podcast for student journalists, learning skills, things like that, what would you say having that candid interview with the vice chair and chair of the chemistry department, how do you think that helped craft your article into something that was better than something that where you just be sitting there asking questions, not really getting to have a conversation, but more of that, what people would think is just an interview where you're just drilling them with questions. But with that candid style that you said you had, how do you think that helped you craft this article?
Oh, God, it helps so much. The chemistry section of this article, for anybody that's listening, like, you know, obviously it's my article. You should go check it out. It's on the Lantern's website. But if you read, the chemistry section's pretty high up. I think we get into it by like the 6th graph. And I had originally had it further down. I had our advisor look at it, and he's like, you got to move this up. This is your most interesting piece. You have all these great quotes. There's a lot of original reporting in here. And I agreed. I guess I just been kind of modest and wanted to move it down because it was so focused on one department. But getting back to your question, it added so much color to the article. You know, without that interview, because I couldn't interview someone from COAM, the article just is me throwing stats at you with no deeper insight, here's kind of the philosophical questions behind it.
Do you think that's kind of what makes a data journalism story better than just being straight data?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at, and I'm not even going to talk about my own story here. I'm going to go back to Sheridan Hendricks, who we had on the podcast last week, wrote about cancer last year in one of her projects. There's a lot of data in there, but that story was so moving and powerful because she got to follow the journey of a girlfriend and boyfriend. The girlfriend had cancer, and they're both students at Ohio State, and she followed that journey. She went to their screenings and appointments with them, and the data was powerful, but the color and emotion added, and obviously my story didn't have emotion, really, but just what can be added from the human aspect. Even with data stories, there's a human aspect. I mean, those numbers ultimately at the end of the day represent people, and you have to have a way to get that across.
That was a great discussion. Join us next week on the Student Slant for more student perspective.